fam. It's me, Lauren, here for another episode of Like a Boss. And this week we're unpacking the topic of failure, that crushing sense of defeat, the devastation or humiliation that we all so desperately try to avoid. My mission here today is to convince you that failure is actually something to be embraced and that learning how to fail is actually a way to learn how to succeed. But when I talk about failure, what I really mean is any area where we don't perform as well as we would like to, and it might feel like we've failed. So this might mean something like we aimed for a distinction, but we only got a pass, or we were hoping our team would win the premiership, but we came runner-up. Or of course, it might be that time when we absolutely and totally bomb out and really, genuinely, truly fail. The disappointment that we feel in these circumstances can be really devastating. For me, it's that sort of swirling sense of guilt and shame, and it leads to me feeling really demotivated and kind of miserable, but only for a little bit. Because I try really hard not to let myself wallow in this feeling for too long. And as soon as I can, to turn my attention to what I can do differently next time to try to learn and improve on that situation. So I spoke to Professor TRACEY to help us unpack this concept of failure and learn how to turn it into a tool for our success. So first, she's going to tell us all about what failure is, and then we're going to go through 3 strategies for how to deal with failure and turn it into a tool for growth, for learning, and for winning.
So I'm Matthew Flinders Distinguished Professor TRACEY Wade. I work in psychology here at Flinders University. I also have trained previously as a clinical psychologist, so I work a lot in the area of eating disorders and also very interested in perfectionism. Yeah, I think Thomas Edison probably defined it the best way because he said, I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. So I think it's a good way to repivot what failure means. It's really basically saying that the strategy just didn't work out. And that might mean that it was the wrong strategy. It might mean that it was the wrong time. It might be that it was not the strategy for that particular person. So it really means that it's a pointer to say, try another way. And I think it's really important to understand that failure is a normal part of the human condition. And the only way to avoid failure is to say nothing, to do nothing, and to produce nothing. Failure essentially lets us know that this is not the right approach for this time. And based on that experience, let's think again. So the real trick about failure is not to treat it as a sign to give up in terms of approaching the goals that matter for you. It might mean that you need to adjust the goal. It might mean that you have to try a different strategy. It might be a different timing, but it certainly doesn't mean giving up. So failure should be a teacher, it shouldn't be an undertaker.
Failure is an innate part of trying, of discovery, of innovation and experimentation. The vast majority of discoveries in the world came through a long process of trying and failing again and again and again. Plus, think of all the discoveries that came directly out of failure. Post-it notes, for example, were created by the scientist Spencer Silver when he was trying to create a super strong adhesive. And I don't know if you've ever used Post-it notes. I think you know that they're not a particularly strong adhesive. So this failure actually turned into a huge success.
I invented Post-its.
So let's have a look at some strategies that we can use to reframe failure and instead use it as a tool to succeed. Number 1, accept that failure offers opportunities for growth.
We, with people that we work with, we often talk about the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is when you have a broken pot, you mend it with melted gold, so that when the pot is repaired, the breakages are very obvious because you can see the gold seams in the pot. And I think failure is like that. It teaches us to actually embrace the setbacks, embrace the vulnerability, because that makes us more valuable. That gives us a more valuable and richer experience of life. And it teaches us critical lessons that we wouldn't have otherwise come across, and we would actually be the poorer for that. It's never pleasant to have a setback. It's always difficult. but it actually can be embraced. And J.K. Rowling has some very good YouTube clips on how setbacks actually taught her that she was much more resilient than she ever realised, and that she had friends whose value was above the price of rubies. And these are things she would not have learned without the setbacks. So they are opportunities for growth. What I would say is there's actually quite a lot of inspirational quotes about failure on, if you just type into your search machine failure quotations, there's actually quite a number from a range of people who obviously have achieved but have embraced failure. And I think sometimes, just to get you through a difficult time, having some of those quotations handy can just be that bridge. So I know when I was doing my PhD, and I went up lots of dead ends and I went down lots of rabbit holes which didn't go anywhere, and I just had a little thing above my desk at work which said, if it doesn't work, that's okay, you will get there. Just keep trying and you do get there. That's the evidence shows you get there, but it takes longer than you want and it takes much more failure. And that for me was just an important, just a sentence. Every time I thought, this is too much, I can't go on, I'd think, okay, yes, that's right. Step back, see bigger picture, get on with it.
So number 2, realise that you don't need to be an expert before you start.
It's just simply not possible. It doesn't even make sense because achievement is necessarily informed by failure. So you can't be an expert. You don't build that without the experience of failure behind you. So expertise takes time and it takes failure to develop, and you just can't separate out those two things.
I think this is a particularly difficult one for anyone who might have some, perfectionist tendencies. We might feel that we need to have all of the answers to something, or that we need to kind of mitigate all potential problems before we get started on something in order to eliminate all chances of failure. But more often than not, this just leads to delays, sometimes to unnecessary work, and sometimes these delays can be so bad that we never actually end up getting started on the thing that we need to do. Plus, we might lose out on some really valuable experience. We learn best when we actually do things, when we put ideas, methods, and things into practice. We need to get our hands dirty. And this might be as simple as testing out a new strategy for writing topic sentences in your essays because you just got some feedback that you need a clearer structure in your writing. Remember that the more we fail, the more information and more knowledge we have to determine whether or not our approach is the right one. And that is what ultimately builds expertise. Number 3 is to make friends with feedback.
Most feedback is useful, and I'd have to say here, not all feedback is useful. Sometimes people give feedback for motivations apart from what's best for the person, but you as the individual can sort out which is helpful and what is not. And the useful feedback is gold. It really takes us out of our own perspective, and it helps us to see the broadest perspective, the broader picture, and that bigger view will actually help us learn much more usefully.
In a university context, learning how to use feedback effectively is one of the most important aspects of success. For many of us, feedback might feel like a judgment, but it is a learning tool. That is what it's designed for. But we must commit to actively doing something with it. We also have to remember that feedback is a comment on our work and not on us personally. And this can be something that's very difficult to separate, particularly when whatever we're being judged on is something that is, really important to us. So when you get feedback, read it carefully and read it critically. Analyze the marker's feedback against the assessment criteria and try to judge where you may have lost marks. In many cases, you may feel like, you have addressed certain criteria, but looking in depth at that feedback might help you to understand where you may have fallen a little bit short, or where what you've done doesn't quite meet the marker's expectations. Then use that feedback to make yourself a checklist of issues to follow up on and get some help with to find ways to improve for next time. For example, if your comments suggest that you need to work on your sentence structure and your expression, you might seek out resources on style or grammar, or come and see an advisor in the Learning Lounge. Then make sure you use this checklist when you're writing your next assignment. The Student Learning Support Service have some resources on how to use feedback, as well as a range of resources that can help you to act on that feedback and improve. So I hope that this quick snapshot about dealing with failure can help you to kind of pivot your thinking from seeing failure as maybe something that's inherently negative to something that is far more positive. If you find that you are really genuinely struggling with this, or you feel like you set very high, unrealistic expectations for yourself and might have some perfectionist tendencies, I do recommend that you book in to see someone from Health Counselling and Disability and have a chat about it. And as I said, the Student Learning Support Service has a range of resources to help you improve your study skills, your writing, and your numeracy. And finally, remember, the only failure that is truly a failure is the failure to learn from our mistakes. Don't forget to check out some of the resources in the blog or share with us some of your tips for how you've handled and grown from failures in the past. And otherwise, I will see you after the break. Thanks.